The computer we are building today is a custom, small footprint console. It is low energy because it has a smaller size motherboard, uses minimal fans, has no spinning drives, and the only main power consumption is from the graphics card. Warning: be sure to discharge all accumulated static electricity by touching a large piece of metal before handling any computer components. Never plug your power supply into the wall while the case is still open. For this project, you are going to need one computer shell, one solid-state drive, 2 RAM sticks, one processor, one motherboard, one cooling system, one graphics card, one power supply, and Windows 10 Media Creation Tool on a USB drive. You can obtain all the materials you need at online stores like Amazon.com. Start by removing the power supply housing from the case. Take the power supply and insert it into the housing. Attach these 4 screws to the outside of the housing. Set up the power supply by first plugging in the power cord. While making sure the power cable ends up being tucked into the side of the power supply, align the power supply with the screw holes in the case. While holding the power supply in place, flip the case over and screw in the power supply from the back. Next, we set up the motherboard. First, we seat the CPU into the motherboard by carefully aligning the pins on the back of the CPU. Drop it into place and clip it in. Next, we put in the cooling bracket screws. Flip the motherboard over and insert the cooling bracket. Flip the motherboard back over and thread a spacer onto each screw. After sliding the 2 brackets onto the mounting screws, thread the nuts on until they are hand tight. Next, align each stick of RAM with their respective slot on the motherboard and carefully slide them into place until the hooks snap closed. Now give power to the motherboard by plugging in the power cables. Our motherboard has these specific ports. Unscrew the graphics card bracket and set it aside. First, take the USB 3.0 cable and plug that into the corresponding port. Next, take the HD audio connector and plug it into the jack. Plug the front panel connectors into their respective pins on the motherboard. If more specific instruction is required, consult the pinout in the motherboard manual. After popping in the faceplate, insert the motherboard into the case and align it with the faceplate. Screw the 4 screws through the motherboard. Connect the SATA cable to the port on the motherboard. Tuck in the front panel connectors and the system fan cable into the edge of the case to allow for ventilation. Next up is the graphics card. Take the graphics card assembly and align it with the graphics card. Screw in the 2 screws. Attach the bracket to hold the graphics card in place. Ensure the graphics card is level and tighten the bracket. Take the PCI extender and insert it into the L bracket included with the case. Connect the other end of the extender to the graphics card. Next, plug in the PCIe power header from the power supply into your graphics card. Wrap all of the coils coming off of the power supply, except for the SATA cable, into a tight coil around the shaft of a screwdriver and stow them next to the power supply. Align the graphics card assembly with the PCIe slot on your motherboard and slowly seat it by rocking it from front to back until you hear it click into place. Slide the solid-state drive into the 2.5-inch bay on the graphics card assembly. Screw the solid-state drive into place with the screws. Now coil the power and SATA cables around the shaft of a screwdriver. Attach the power and SATA cables to the SSD. Now stow the excess cable next to the other cables in the case. Now we will install the CPU cooler. Plug the fan on the heatsink into the CPU fan header on the motherboard. Loosely fasten one side of the crossbeam to the CPU cooling bracket. Place the cooling plate on the CPU and guide the plate into position. You may need to adjust the cooling plate until the screw holes line up properly. Tighten the 2 screws into the metal crossbeam, ensuring it is lined up with the notches on the cooler. Secure the graphics card assembly with 6 of the case screws. Attach the side panel to the case with 2 case screws. Screw the 2 antennas into the motherboard on the back if you plan on using Wi-Fi. Finally, you'll need to install Windows 10. Plug the power, HDMI, keyboard, and mouse into the back of your computer. Plug in the Windows install media into a USB port on the computer. Boot Windows from the USB via BIOS and follow on-screen instructions. For comparison, we set the final product next to a full-sized PC tower and an Xbox 360.